Katie Books Productions presents an original podcast, Manhunt, written, produced, and narrated by Earl Sewell. When Luther impulsively stole Packard's SUV a few days ago, he felt an incredible sense of power. He felt as if he'd finally done something to take command over his out-of-control life. As he recklessly sped away in Packard's SUV, he had no idea of where he was headed or what he wanted to do. He was only living in the moment and celebrating a personal triumph over a man who had been his oppressor for so long. When Luther drove the SUV to a nearby forest preserve located at the corner of 87th Street and Western Avenue, he located a secluded parking spot where he'd planned to leave the car until the police or Packard found it. As he was about to step away from the vehicle, he noticed a black duffel bag sitting on the floor behind the driver's seat. Curious as to what was inside, Luther grabbed the bag and unzipped it and discovered it was filled with cash. "Oh, shit," Luther said aloud. "There's nothing but $100 bills in here. This must be some kind of payoff," Luther concluded. Luther got back inside the SUV and locked himself in. At first, he was feeling very uneasy and unsettled because he knew that Packard would be pissed off. But then, something happened to him. He told himself, "I deserve this money. Packard burned me out, pretty much left me homeless. I could use this money to get the fresh start that I've always been talking about." Luther felt panicky and overjoyed at the same time. "I need a little something to calm my nerves, to help me think clearly," he said to himself. Luther then drove to a nearby liquor store and picked up a bottle of Crown Royal. Luther then drove back to the forest preserve and drank. After guzzling down his liquor, Luther decided that he wanted to spend a night at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. Luther fired the SUV back up and then sped off toward the city. As he drove along, he rummaged through Packard's music collection and found songs by popular rappers. "Yeah, this is the shit here," Luther proclaimed as he placed a CD into the player. Luther was feeling grand as he drove along with music blasting loudly. Luther then glanced down at the ashtray and noticed several sticks of marijuana. "Oh, it just keeps getting better," Luther said as he picked up a joint and fired it up. Luther reclined back in the seat so that he could relax completely. He turned onto Lakeshore Drive, which offered him a straight shot to all of the downtown Chicago hotels. As he sped along Lakeshore Drive with the music blaring, a joint perched between his fingers, he glanced over at Lake Michigan and tried to appreciate the beauty of the water and Chicago skyline. Luther felt incredibly mellow, at ease, and relaxed. His eyes began to get heavy with weariness. "Oh, it's time for a nap, player," he whispered aloud. Forgetting he was still driving a vehicle, Luther allowed his intoxication to seduce him into sleep.
6 a.m. and I'm up again. I got tired eyes, need a cup of blend. That's right, in the AM, that's my only friend.
Get out of the car! Luther was jolted awake by a chorus of screaming voices. What? Luther felt someone tugging on him and instinctively fought them off. Leave me the fuck alone, Luther shouted as he sat upright. He quickly took in his surrounding and realized that something horrible had happened. The SUV had crashed into one of the gigantic shoreline boulders. The motor of the SUV was whining loudly because his foot was still on the gas pedal. Luther lifted his foot and glanced out the rearview mirror. It was then he saw a man down on his knees, wailing. The wail was a mournful one. Luther adjusted the mirror once again and saw the man was kneeling next to a body. Get out of the car! Someone reached inside of the car and tried to remove the keys from the ignition. Luther pushed the man to the ground and began to panic as he saw a mob of people moving swiftly towards him. You've run over somebody! He heard someone from the mob cry out. Oh God! Luther panicked and quickly put the car in reverse. He backed up and sped away as quickly as he could. He drove recklessly across the landscape and back towards Lakeshore Drive. He blew his horn continuously and almost ran over several joggers in an attempt to flee from the scene. I don't want to go to jail. Luther was scared out of his mind. It was an accident, Luther said aloud as he began to hyperventilate. Luther drove back onto Lakeshore Drive and sideswiped a concrete barrier. The sound of shattering glass and buckling metal intensified Luther's desperate escape attempt. I've got to dump this car, he said, with fright. No one saw me. No one saw my face. He tried to convince himself of that. Luther exited Lakeshore Drive at 31st Street and zoomed west, away from the lakefront. He ran a red light and nearly collided with a Chicago Transit Authority bus. Once he reached Federal Street, which is where some of the city's public housing projects were located, he drove into the parking lot and parked the Blazer next to a green dumpster. Luther then, as casually and as quickly as he could, grabbed the duffel bag of money and fled. Over the past few days, Luther worked hard to push the memory of the accident out of his mind. He repeatedly told himself that he never stole Packard's car and wasn't in any way involved in the hit-and-run accident. Luther repeated these thoughts to himself every second of the day until, in his mind, it became the undisputable and absolute truth. Luther took the money he found in Packard's Blazer and rented himself a partially furnished studio apartment on 52nd Street at the corner of Woodlawn Avenue. The place came with a white stove, a refrigerator, and a small wooden desk that had deep scratches in it. There was also a metal chair and a small color television. It also featured a Murphy bed, which could be raised up and placed in a closet if guests came over. The white tile in the bathroom shower had been recently replaced, along with the tile on the kitchen floor. It was perfect for Luther, much better than Packard's dump. Rent was $550 a month, and Luther paid 6 months of it in advance, which left him with ample money to buy new clothes, bed linen, dishes, and perhaps a better television and music system. A week after the accident, Luther was taking an evening stroll down 53rd Street to the local Osco pharmacy. He picked up some household items and toiletries. On the way back, he stopped into Doc's Fish Restaurant and ordered himself a catfish dinner complete with coleslaw and French fries. Once he returned to his apartment, he ate his food slowly, savoring every bite and feeling like for once in his life, things were looking up for him. Although at times he was lonely because he didn't have friends or family, he was making the best of it. Once he finished dinner, he turned on the television. The sound came on first before the picture did. He could hear a reporter talking about the hit-and-run accident he was involved in. "Police are asking that anyone with information contact Area 2 Police Headquarters," said the newscaster as the picture finally came into view. Luther was now looking at a detective standing in front of a clump of microphones. There were several people behind him who appeared to be the parents and grandparents of the hit-and-run victim. They all appeared grief-stricken. Luther felt their pain, and the blood in his veins began to pulse with trepidation as he listened carefully. "The family is offering a $25,000 reward for anyone who has information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible for the tragedy. If you have any information, please contact us at Area 2 headquarters." Luther clicked off the television. He couldn't endure listening to the report any longer. He felt horrible and smeared away his own tears of sorrow for what he'd done. "I wasn't involved with that," he reminded himself again and again and again and again. "You are not a terrible person," he said. "They don't have anything. Besides, you were nowhere near the accident. You were downtown at the Taste of Chicago Festival." Luther willed himself to believe that his words were true. Saturday morning, Luther was awakened by the sound of dumpsters banging against each other. The garbage men were making an enormous ruckus as they hauled away trash. He brought himself fully awake by taking a deep yawn and stretching his body all the way out. "From now on, I'm going to work on being positive and get my act together," he thought. Luther freshened up, then left his apartment to take care of some errands. He went to a nearby mall and purchased himself some clothes. He also purchased himself a pay-as-you-go cell phone and used it to locate jobs and set up interviews. One interview was for a mall security guard. Another was for a doorman at a luxury condo north of the city. Not willing to stop there, he decided to travel to Cook County Hospital and fill out a job application. He heard on many occasions that the facility was constantly searching for janitorial staff. Feeling good about himself and what he'd accomplished throughout the day, Luther decided to treat himself to dinner at a neighborhood restaurant on 53rd Street called Mellow Yellows. Hyde Park was a friendly community that had a mixture of black, white, Spanish, and Asian cultures. The 53rd Street Strip was the nucleus of the neighborhood. It was lined with restaurants, grocery stores, and a movie theater. Walking was the best way to get around in his neighborhood. He walked into Mellow Yellows and was given a seat at the window where he could watch foot traffic. "Your server will be with you in a moment, sir," remarked the hostess as she placed a menu in front of him. "Thank you," Luther responded. Luther looked over the menu and decided he'd have the T-bone steak with mashed potatoes and a beer to wash it all down. He folded the menu shut and rested his elbows on the table. He began to question his ability to handle the pressure of being independent. What if he ran out of money and had to live on the streets? What if none of the job interviews panned out? Then what? Fear and insecurity were Luther's most daunting demons. Luther always felt as if he were born with an irreversible curse. He had been told by his mother, Sugar, on countless occasions that he was worthless and useless and cursed. Sugar blamed everything that went wrong in her life on him. Although Luther was now in his 30s, he was still battling the emotional scars of being abandoned by his mother. He closed his eyes and tried to push his unwanted thoughts deep into a chamber of his mind. When the unwanted thoughts were gone, he opened his eyes and gazed out of the window. He saw Carmen approaching, wearing a Barack Obama t-shirt with blue shorts and white gym shoes. She had on earbuds and appeared to be out taking an evening walk. Luther quickly sprang to his feet, knocked on the glass hard with his knuckles, and began waving his hands to get her attention. How are you doing?" he yelled out from behind the glass, oblivious to the fact that other customers had turned in their seats to observe his inappropriate behavior. Carmen smiled and waved hello to him. Luther was filled with excited energy as he smiled back at her. "Did you get your car fixed?" Luther continued to talk loud from behind the glass. "What?" Carmen stopped walking. She didn't understand a word he said. "Your car." Luther made a gesture with his hands, simulating a person driving a car. "Did you get it fixed?" "Oh." Carmen finally understood what he was saying through his hand gestures. "No." She shook her head from side to side. Luther waved his hand frantically, asking her to come inside and sit with him. Carmen shook her head back and forth, declining his invitation. "Please." Luther put his hands in a praying position and looked as sad as he could. Carmen suddenly realized Luther still had her parts to fix her car, and maybe his offer was still on the table, so she decided to go in. "Hey," Carmen said as she stood in front of an empty chair at his table. "Have a seat." Luther motioned for her to sit down. "Are you hungry?" "I'm okay. I have food waiting for me at home." "Did you cook it?" "No, I still have to cook it." "Then there will be no cooking for you on this warm summer night. Dinner is on me." Before Carmen could decline his offer, the busboy came over and sat a glass of water in front of her, along with a bread basket and some butter. The smell of the warm bread cinched it for her. "Did that fire destroy your entire apartment?" Carmen asked. "Yeah, it pretty much destroyed the building," Luther answered. "I am so sorry to hear that. It seems as if ever since you met me, you've had nothing but misfortune." Carmen sympathized with him. "No, none of what happened had anything to do with you. Shit just happens sometimes." Luther dismissed her preconception. "You seem awful up-tempo about things," Carmen said as the hostess handed her a menu. Carmen laid it flat on the surface of the table and began glancing at her options. "It's the new me. I'm working on being much more positive about life in general. I'm rolling with the punches these days, and I refuse to allow anything to get me down." "Are you guys ready to order yet, or do you need some more time?" The young female waitress came up to the table with her pen in position to write down their orders on her pad. "I'll have the T-bone steak with mashed potatoes and a beer," Luther said. "And how would you like that steak cooked, sir?" "Well done, please," Luther answered. "Order up, Carmen, it's on me." "I'll just have the chicken Caesar salad with ranch dressing," Carmen said. "Okay," replied the waitress and took their menus. "I'll put your orders in right away." "I was about to say that in this world, you've got to work hard at things, you know," Luther continued. "Up until now, I haven't been doing the things that I need to do to make it." "Tell me, Luther, what did you do before you were a mechanic?" Carmen's interest was sparked by Luther's sudden openness. "Nothing. You see, when I was a kid, I became a ward of the state and had to live in a foster home. I was lucky, I suppose, because the people the state placed me with were in it for the money. They didn't put their hands on me, but they did make me feel insignificant to a certain degree. They made me feel like I was dumb as hell because I wasn't smart enough to do my schoolwork on my own. I struggled in school. I was a kid who got teased because my clothes weren't always clean. I was a kid who sat in the back of the class that no one really cared about. Anyway, by the time I reached high school, I was labeled learning disabled and was placed in remedial classes. I developed an I don't give a damn attitude, and the teachers did the same." Luther took a sip of his beer, which the waitress sat in front of him. Carmen didn't say a word. She just waited patiently for him to continue. Anyway, the only reason I didn't drop out was because of auto mechanics class. When it came to cars and engines, I knew what I was doing. I enjoyed reading about what makes them work and how to fix them. I was the smartest kid in the class when it came to cars, and my instructor told me I should consider a career in auto mechanics or engineering. He told me I should be designing engines and building cars for Ford or Dodge. He even said I could be one of the mechanics working on cars at the Indianapolis 500, making tall dollars. So, did you go to college and pursue that? Carmen asked, genuinely interested. Like I said, I was only good at working on cars. When it came to my other subjects, I had major trouble. Things just didn't click for me like they did for other kids. I took that ACT test, and I scored like a 2 on it. I couldn't get into college with a score like that. I even took the test a second time and got the same score. It didn't matter, though, because even if I had passed with flying colors, the foster parents I was with were on my back to leave. Because once I turned 18 and graduated, they would no longer receive money from the state for me. That meant they wanted my ass out of their house. Luther, that was a horrible thing for them to do. Carmen was once again feeling very sympathetic to Luther's plight. I'm cursed, I suppose. The dice just never rolled my way, Luther said. So, what happened when you turned 18? Carmen picked up a slice of bread from the basket and sat it on the plate before her. I had to get a job. I took on handyman work around the neighborhood and made a few dollars, but the pressure was on me to leave. Even though I offered to pay for my upkeep, the couple was already looking into taking in a 5-year-old, and my room was where they wanted him to go. I eventually landed 2 jobs, one at a car wash on the west side near the United Center, and the other job was as a security guard for a clothing store on Madison Street. I left my foster parents and found an elderly lady who lived on Adams Street. She rented me a room in her home, which supplemented her income. Well, good for you. It sounds as if the people you were staying with were bad news. Malcolm X Junior College is nearby Adams Street. Did you ever consider going to night school? At that moment, the waitress returned with their dinners. Can I get you guys anything else? She asked. No, they both replied in unison, and she quickly left to attend another table. No, I was too busy worried about keeping a roof over my head. Rent for the room was $75 a week, which wasn't bad for me. I stayed with the elderly woman for 12 years, and she never once went up on the rent. She was as sweet as they came. Well, what happened to her? Carmen asked. Her health began to fail, and she needed 24-hour medical care. Her family ended up putting her in a nursing home, and then they turned around and sold her home. So I had to leave. So, how did you end up with a job as a mechanic at a muffler shop? Carmen asked. Well, one day, while I was working at the car wash, a man who used to date my mother came through. We made small talk, and I mentioned to him about my situation. You see, after the elderly woman's house was sold, I ended up living at the nearby YMCA. Anyway, I told Packard that I was good underneath the hood of a car. He told me a buddy of his owned a car repair shop and owed him a big favor. He had sympathy for me and told me he could hook me up with a job. He also said he owned a 3-flat building and the basement apartment was vacant. The rest, as they say, is history. Carmen was silent for a moment, taking in and analyzing Luther's story. She pitied him for having to survive on his own at such a young age and admired him for finding a way to make it. He didn't give up hope, and she thought that was commendable. She thought that all Luther really needed was someone stable in his life who'd give him the loving home he never had. But Carmen was curious as to why he didn't mention any girlfriends or relationships he had during that time. Even in his situation, women are notorious for helping a man along, even if his situation appears hopeless. "So, do you have any children?" she asked, as a roundabout way to pry into his love life. "Who, me? Hell no. I'm not into kids. I don't want any. They're too much trouble and cost way too much. Besides, I'm not the fatherly type." "Okay." Carmen's reply was dry because she was not exactly sure of what to make of his response. In the back of her mind, she wondered if there was room for him to change his fixed attitude. "Do you have someone special in your life?" Carmen was just curious as hell. "No, I don't have anyone. The last serious relationship I had didn't work out." "Was it a bitter breakup?" Carmen continued to pry. "Something like that. My girl was cheating on me with a guy I considered to be a friend at the time." "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. What about your biological mother? Where's she at?" Carmen continued to probe into Luther's background. "Let's not talk about her. She means nothing to me," Luther said rather abruptly. Carmen realized that she'd struck a tender nerve. "Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you." Luther paused and then continued. "The fire was a good thing. It helped me to make some decisions. I have a few job interviews next week. Plus, because of the fire, I've run into a little extra cash. I've got a studio apartment over on Woodlawn now." "Well, that's wonderful, Luther. I'm glad to hear things are working for you," Carmen said as she smiled at him. Luther wasn't a bad-looking guy, she thought to herself. A little rough around the edges, but that could be fixed. "What about you? Have you gotten your car up and running yet?" "No, it's just sitting in front of my house," Carmen sighed. "I've lost my tools in the fire," Luther replied. He actually left them in Packard's blazer. "But I can get what I need and drop by one day this week and take care of it for you." "Really? Luther, that would help me out a great deal." Carmen perked up at the thought of finally getting her car up and running. "I love to help out when I can." Luther smiled as if she were the only woman in the world. "Thanks for having dinner with me. Talking with you has helped." "Well, thank you for inviting me to have dinner. This is very nice of you," Carmen said as she picked up her fork and began to eat her salad.